What's up everyone, my name's Devin from DEBOS Fishing, and today we're talking about fishing wood from the banks during the summer. Now, a funny running saying on my channel is find wood, pitch to wood, and it's just a friendly reminder in my head that anytime I see wood, it's like, automatic, I see wood, gotta pitch to it real quick, right? Because especially during those summer months, there's a really good chance that that piece of wood or that little piece of brush is gonna hold a fish. Those wood piles, logs, stumps, those are great places to find bass during the summer because, unlike the spring where you've got all kinds of, fronts coming through, there's tons of rain, a lot of cloudy days, wind. During the summer months, a lot of people go out early in the morning, late at night, and they kind of think that the middle of the day is just a waste of time, skip it. Well, fish are usually going to go out deep, if you've got a big lake, but a lot of the smaller ponds, smaller lakes, the deepest part of that lake could be 10, 12 feet, right? And while some fish will go out there, there's still going to be a good number of fish up shallow. That could be grass lines, could be docks. But again, what we're talking about today is wood. So, trees that have fallen down in the water and laying down, or brush piles that you can just barely see sticking up, or, stumps. A lot of, the lakes we have here, old forests or pieces of forest that they've cut down and it's, just a big stump field. Any of those pieces of wood provide cover. They provide cover for the bait fish, and if there's bait fish, there's going to be bass there feeding on them, and they can be comfortable. And oftentimes, on those high pressure days, high sun, there's no clouds, bass will get right up to that cover, put nose right up against it, and just hang out there, lethargic until the, later in the evening when they usually will feed up. But doesn't mean they won't eat. You just have to attack those bass a little bit different. All right, so as I'm going through all this, I'm going to work from the spots where you have less cover, maybe just one lay down or a couple, stumps. Generally, you're not going to get hung up on those as much, and then we're going to move to the heavier cover where you've got a big brush pile or lots of different wood intertwined, a beaver dam, something like that, and I have a couple kind of different methods to attack those. So the first combo is your kind of do-it-all. You've probably already got one. A medium-heavy combo rated for lures up to 3/4 or an ounce. This is the TFO, Temple Fork Elite. Tactical Elite bass there. I did a review on this quite some time ago, but a great do-it-all rod. Nice and light, it balances, fits well in my hand, something that you can fish all day. And that's not something that I feel like people talk about enough is how comfortable does it feel? I don't care if I've got a $1,000 rod. If it's not comfortable and I can't flip and pitch around stuff all day, I'm not going to want to go to it. But your choice. I like something from 7 foot to maybe 7'6" for bank fishing. 7 foot to 7'2" is usually what I go to, but if you're on a boat, you can go a little bit longer. That's my choice for bank fishing. Now, a rod like this, like I said, you can do it all, but I like to have something that's a little bit more sensitive. So if you're dragging finesse jigs, Texas rigs, something where you can really feel those bites, I would spend just a little bit more money on that. Same for my finesse, spinning rods. That's where I look for that sensitivity more. Something like a topwater or a chatterbait, spinnerbait. Usually you'll feel those thumps pretty good, but that's the rod. Now for a reel, I like a 7-speed reel. This is the Shimano SLX XT. Good small profile, fits really good in hand. Flip and pitch with it. Didn't have any issues with this rod or reel. Here's a better look at the side of that, the XT. A great little combo. So something that's comfortable, doesn't need to be super heavy because again, this is kind of around the sparse cover. I've got one lay down tree, a couple logs. Nothing super crazy thick, but if I get into conditions like that, I want to have a little bit heavier setup now, especially from the bank. Line. Good thing talk about line. 15-pound fluorocarbon is what I like for flipping and pitching a Texas rig around light cover. Now, we're going to cover Texas rigs. I didn't even get into that yet, but Texas rig is going to be the lure of choice because I don't think there's a better way to attack wood, laydowns, brush from the bank. No better way than a Texas rig. So both these are my Texas rig flipping and pitching setup. So that's the first one. So the second one, a little bit heavier setup. This happens to be the Shimano X Pride rod. Happens to be a 7.2 heavy rated for lures up to 1.5 ounces. And that's going to be very common in the heavy rods. Up to 1.5 ounces is what you're going to find. So once I start throwing a 3/8 ounce weight, sometimes, a 5/16, or up is when I'm usually going to go to this heavy rod as well. So I usually let the cover dictate the rod. Less cover, just a couple sticks, I can go to a medium heavy. The more cover, the more chance that I need to get that fish out of heavy stuff, I'm going to go to a little bit heavier setup. So that's why the heavy rod. This is a 7.5 speed Lew's Tournament Pro. Really good reel. I feel like this is kind of one of those reels that goes under the radar. They had a bunch of these on clearance some time ago, but good little reel. Great for flipping and pitching. I've used it for casting stuff, but I've really liked it just to flip and pitch because of that, that LFS Lew's profile fits really good in hand. In line on my heavy setup, usually 17 to 20. And you can go above that. I don't find that I need to go above 20 pounds very much here in the Midwest. You know, if you're in the South fishing Lake Fork, some crazy place where there's tons and tons of cover, it could be different. But for me here in the Midwest, usually 17 or 20 pound on my heavy setup. Okay, so for lure choices, again, we're working from the, more sparse cover into the thick stuff. You can't beat, in the summer, a ribbon tail, curly tail worm. I would say like 7 inches up to 10 inches. My old man would kick me if I didn't talk about this one. The 8.5 inch Berkeley Power Worm in Tequila Sunrise, his ultimate favorite. I can't tell you how many days I've had my butt kicked by this specific worm. But a ton of good different worms out there with that ribbon tail. The Zumo Monster's a good one. X-Zone's got an 11 inch Blitz worm. I know there's Bass Pro worm, whatever it is, the ribbon tail worm. There's a bunch of different ones out there. The Culprit was a really good worm back in the day. Any of those that you like, find a color and brand that you like that works in your area and go with that. Now again, because of that long tail, how much is moving back here? It's got a bunch of movement, big body. This does tend to get wrapped up in brush, around logs, kind of up and in and around, tangled in stuff when it's really thick. So that's why I stick to these around sparser cover, okay? So I'm going from like a log, a couple stumps, something like that where I'm not gonna get this all tangled and intertwined in something. Now, when I go to an in-between bait, I want something that's got some movement to it, not as much as the worm, but something with a little bit more slender profile to get in and out of stuff. So I'm going to do some sort of craw or creature bait that's got some movement to it. Now, you can even fish these in thick stuff, but this is kind of my in-between. It's still got movement back here. It's got a lot of good, kicking action back here. This is the Missile Baits D-Bomb. Good looking profile, but you'll notice no big long things to get stuck, nothing going out horizontally. It's just a good slender profile to go in and out of wood. Now you could do something like the Rage Bug. There's all kinds of these. This happens to be the Rage Craw in one of the best colors ever that doesn't get talked about enough, that black and purple. Oh, there's all kinds of different lures like this that have some action, but still a good, slender, not too crazy wild profile to really get stuck in stuff. And last, I would move to a beaver bait when it's really, really thick, brushy stuff. I really don't want anything that's kicking and flapping well. I want it to be kind of like a dart. Get down in there, get to those fish, especially if they're, more oriented towards the bottom or really in the middle of that thick stuff. Something's gonna come out in and out easy, and that's gonna be like a beaver style bait. Reaction Innovations really kicked this thing off with their Sweet Beaver. They've got a couple different sizes, use what you like. X-Zone has this, the, Adrenaline Bug. Again, they've also got that junior size. If you're old school, something like the Pit Boss, yes, these do still have movement in back, but gosh, those are just so darn good. Or something like this, the Rodent. But a beaver style bait doesn't really have much movement to it. It's really to get in and out of that crazy thick brush and stuff. Now, a couple things to think about when you're rigging this up. For the skinnier, more slender baits like a worm or something like this, I'll use just a regular worm hook like this. An offset worm hook is great for skinnier baits. Good hookup ratio. You can see the point of the hook there is not in line with the eye there. It's kind of offset a little bit. Good hookup ratio. Doesn't work as well for creature baits. I like to use an EWG for that. Usually like a 3/0 to a 5/0 will do most creature baits, but because of that thicker body, I want a bigger gap with that EWG hook. This is a big one though. What do you do for the weight? Well, depending on if the fish are hitting it on the fall or if they're really just oriented toward the bottom, when you get it down there, shake it a couple times, that's when they're hitting it. That's when you can really mess with this stuff. The weight is one piece of it, so I can start with a lighter weight. I would say usually like a 1/4 or 5/16 is a great spot to start. If they're really hitting it on the bottom, you can move it up more just to get that lure down quicker. If they're hitting it on the fall, you can drop down to something, smaller, 3/16 or something like that. Really give it more time to fall and stay in front of their face. Or you can go to a lure that has more drag. So a worm like this is just a cut tail worm. This is gonna have some motion for them, but still gonna drop pretty quick. It's just a straight, slender profile. I could switch over to something like this Culprit worm with this big tail. It's gonna slow it down. That movement in the water is gonna catch it, create more drag, and it's gonna slow that down. So that's something to think about. But the weight, speaking of that weight, do you peg it or not? Well, depends on what you're around. I try to go unpegged if I can get away with it. So if it's just a couple stumps, a couple lay down logs that are pretty big, I'll go unpegged. But once I really start to get into that thick stuff, especially brush, I'm going to use a little bobber stop like this and peg the weight down, which means when I throw this in, the weight is connected to the lure. If it's not connected to it and you get in and around a bunch of brush and stuff, this weight's going to fall down. Good chance it gets all tangled up the line, the lure's trying to get through, and you get all tangled up in there. So the thicker the brush, heavier the cover, I am going to peg that weight. Okay, I've got 3 tips for you that have really helped me be a lot more successful when I'm out from on the banks fishing wood. So number 1 is going to be start close and then work farther away from you. What I mean is, as I'm walking up to the bank, I see a really good piece of brush, maybe, 10 feet off the bank there. I'm not gonna walk right up to the water's edge and be looking, casting my shadow out on that, throwing, out in the middle of it, blowing the whole thing up. I'm gonna stay back, maybe 6, 8 feet and flip to the front of that brush, the closest to me. That way, if I get a fish, I pull it right from the front into me, unhook it, weigh it, do whatever, because it's probably gonna be a 10 pounder, the way I fish. And then walk up to the water's edge and start to pick the rest of that apart, pick the edges of it apart, left and right side. Then I'll go, if I can get to the back of it, move a little bit of angle, and then right to the dead center of it. And we're gonna get to that more, but the reason I say that is I see a lot of people go to those spots and fling into it and, blows the whole thing up because they're snagged, and then the whole spot's done. It's burned up. So work the closest spot to you, get the fish in if you get one there, and then start to work the other parts of it. That way you've still got more spots to hit than just once. Number 2 is always make sure you've got a way to get that fish out. The guys in the boats, you have an advantage because you control over to it. If, you set the hook and you've got a fish deep down in that brush, you just can't get it out. You control over to it, kind of try to manipulate that bass, steer it out of there. From the bank, oftentimes you're limited from the number of spots you've even got to fish, so it might be so thick and brushy and crazy. There might only be, 4, 5, 6 openings I can actually get to and fish. And if there's a good wood pile there, if I fling over, 5 logs to get to it right in the middle heart of that, what are my chances of getting that fish out? Are you willing to strip down to your skivvies and jump in and swim in and get it? Maybe. Make for a good YouTube video. I'm not. So if I throw in there, I've got to try to make sure I've got a way to get that fish back out and to me. And there's a couple things to think about when you do that. If you flip into that brush and you get a fish, you set it and you start to feel tension. The biggest thing is keep that rod tip up and keep constantly reeling. So try not to set your hook and then when you've got it, drop your rod tip down and give it any sort of room. That's why I talk about going to a heavy rod, something where I can get right into the power of that rod. It sets that hook good, and then I can really get that fish's head turned around and coming toward me. What I don't want is for that fish to dive deep down into the heart of that stuff. I want to keep constant pressure on it. And if you feel like you're at a spot where it's kind of stuck a little bit, just leave it there. Don't keep pulling and yanking. I see people doing this. Don't do that. Just keep it there, constant pressure, and a lot of times that fish will find its way out. Now, if you need to, you can give it just a little bit of room to see if it can work around something, but I want to try to keep constant pressure on it. Now, listen, there's going to be sometimes you get in there really, really deep. It's in a crazy spot and you can't get it out. Can't worry about that. Sometimes you lose them, but if at all possible, whenever I walk up to a spot, I've always got in the back of my head, when I flip this in, do I have a way to get that fish out? All right, the third tip, which kind of brings all this together, is presentation matters. When I was younger, learning to fish wood, I would, flip 2, 3 feet out away from that wood because I didn't want to get snagged, right? I just had my little tackle box of lures. I hated getting snagged, hated losing lures, so I would fish safe, right? I would make sure I wasn't getting snagged first and foremost, and catching the fish was kind of an afterthought. In the summer, when those fish are really tucked up tight to logs and cover, they will literally be nose setting on that, and you can bring a swim bait bite, chatterbait bite, doesn't matter, but you drop a worm or creature bait right in front of them or even hit them, just out of instinct, they'll grab it. It's that reaction strike, right? And that's what you're kind of looking for when those bass are, not a crazy bite, they're not actively out feeding, eating, chasing bait. I'm trying to put that lure in a spot where I think that bass is going to be hit it in the face and give it no other choice but to grab it. I kind of use the example of if I throw a ball at you, right, you're going to just react and catch it. That's what I want that fish to do. Throw it in there with just a little bit of splash. Try to get as close to that log as you can. Presentation really matters. And when you've gone through a day of you've fished 3 hours, no bites, you get to this great looking log. Sometimes you're just flinging it in there thinking, why in the heck am I even out here? I haven't caught anything. But always keep that in the back of your mind. Make that pitch count, because you never know, it could be your PB sitting there. All right, folks, do me a favor, leave me a comment below and let me know what is one thing you have done to be more successful when you're fishing around wood. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it, and maybe I'll get into that in a later video coming up. When you're fishing around brush and wood, you could throw a spinnerbait, you could throw a jig, a bunch of different things, but for a bank angler, I really think that the Texas rig is one of the absolute best ways you can attack it. But if you've got a different tip, leave it below. I'd love to hear from y'all. Again, my name is Devin from DEBOS Fishing. Thank you all for watching on the Monster Bass channel, and until next time,